What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WrestleRant, where every single Tuesday I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the content that I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking NXT TakeOver London from December of 2015. I've been waiting a long time to rewatch this show and talk about it for WrestleRant. I fucking love this show. Now, I talked about TakeOver Respect 2 weeks ago, and I mentioned how that one does not get the respect, see what I did there? It deserves as one of the more underrated TakeOvers they've ever done. Now, every TakeOver has either been good, great, amazing, or what have you. There's never been a disappointing or a bad TakeOver. This one was no exception. That being said, it was the first TakeOver to take place overseas, and the second TakeOver to take place somewhere other than Full Sail. The first one being TakeOver Brooklyn, which I was at, which I talked about a few weeks ago here on the channel, and a few months earlier in August of 2015. This one taking place right before Christmas. The timing could not have worked out any better. Now, my personal experience, maybe it's just my experience watching the show, which is why I love it so much. A lot like TakeOver Respect, I did watch this show with my buddy RJ at Mr. Marceau, at RJ_Marceau on the Twitter machine. Follow him there. Cheap plug. It was the week of our finals. Now, I had finals on Monday, Tuesday, and one on Friday. I was still there throughout the week, so I had to stay until the very end of finals week, which on paper does not sound too fun, but Mr. Marceau was sticking around as well for a final that he had on Friday, I think, too. So I had nothing going on Wednesday or Thursday, so my Wednesday was completely free. And RJ's roommates was gone. All of his roommates were gone. Pretty much everyone was gone. My roommate was gone, too. So we hooked up for the show that Wednesday afternoon, the first and only TakeOver to ever air on an afternoon, because it was live in London that Wednesday night, but it was and it was in being live in London, it was like 3 o'clock on the East Coast. So we got food, we watched the show that Wednesday afternoon. It's about a 2.5 hour show. Just really, really fun stuff. I love this show a lot. The atmosphere was great. You guys know I love the England crowds. This one was as rowdy as ever, chanting stuff for every single match. It was just a lot of fucking fun. I have a lot of fond memories of the show, and watching it back always brings back memories of watching it with Mr. Marceau. And that stuff is typically almost as fun as the show itself. You know, it's usually almost every bit as memorable as the show itself. So anyway, let's get right into it. The opening match, Asuka versus Emma. Now, Asuka had only made her in-ring debut a few months earlier at TakeOver Respect, which I talked about, against Dana Brooke, in a very good match, surprisingly, involving Dana Brooke. That's a bit of a shocker. Emma is ages, light years better than Dana Brooke in the ring. So, on paper, this was destined to be a great match, and it definitely was. These two worked very, very well together, a very hard-hitting affair. Dana Brooke was at ringside. She got tossed out at one point. Asuka had to battle back against the odds. The crowd was behind Asuka every step of the way. I think this was where Emma debuted those glasses that she was wearing for a while, and she might still wear them to the ring if I'm not mistaken. But Emma looked smoking here, and Asuka looked great here too. Both in the ring and otherwise. But anyway, the match itself was a great way to kick off the show. They worked amazingly well together. The crowd was very much behind Asuka. And in the end, it was Asuka scoring the victory. Now, at one point, it looked like Emma almost won the match. Now, she almost had the match won. It's like, holy shit, are they going to spoil Asuka's undefeated streak this early? But they did not. They had Asuka win, as she should have. But it was a very, very good match. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Asuka emerging victorious in the opening contest to kick off the night. After that, for the NXT Tag Team titles, Dash and Dawson. This was before they officially called themselves the Revival, and I think after their mechanic stage. But Dash and Dawson taking on Colin Cassidy and Enzo Amore, obviously Big Cass, but he was still Colin Cassidy by this point. And what I thought, again, was a very, very fun match. A match I didn't have high hopes for. Everyone and their mother, myself included, thought that Enzo and Cass were winning the tag titles on this show. After the build-up and the video package, and the theme song for the show, by the way, was also very, very good. But everyone thought that they were winning the belts. The time seemed right. The crowd was going to go crazy. They didn't go for the belts in their native Brooklyn as they should have at TakeOver a few months earlier. But this was the time. This was the time to do the title change, and they didn't do it. But I wasn't mad about it. Now, I talked about Hell in a Cell last week with Sasha Banks and Charlotte. Now, that was a bit of a different story because that was in the main event and in Sasha's hometown, and it made sense to do Sasha winning. Now, the similarities here between the two matches was that it made sense to do the title change here for Enzo and Cass. But NXT, thinking long-term, didn't do the switch because they knew American Alpha was getting hot. They were getting over as baby faces. So why do the title change here? Why put the belts in Enzo and Cass when they're going to be going up to the main roster anyway? They are the freaking New Age Outlaws before they split up, they were the New Age Outlaws of the modern era, where despite being 5-time tag team champions, they were over no matter what. Champions or not, they were always over. Enzo and Cass were no different in NXT. So it was a bit disappointing when they didn't win the championships, but the match was very, very good. Now we get great tag title matches from NXT all the time now, whether it be DIY and Authors of Pain or Authors of Pain Insanity or DIY and The Revival. All these other great tag teams, The Revival and American Alpha. We always get great tag team title matches, pretty much every takeover nowadays. Back then, they were hard to come by, and I say back then like it was 10 years ago. It was only 2 years ago. But I talked about at TakeOver Brooklyn how that was the best tag title match up to that point between the Vaudevillains and Blake and Murphy. This one was way better. I think this one is one of the better, of that time period, tag title matches we had ever seen in NXT. And Enzo and Cass aren't like great workers either. They're over with the audience, but they're not the most technical competitors you'll ever see. So the fact they pulled off a really, really good performance here with a great up-and-coming tag team, Dash and Dawson, was a pleasant surprise. And I thought it was one of the better matches of the night. The finish was amazing. Enzo got shoved off the top rope after Cass got taken out at ringside. Got hit with a code breaker, the Shatter Machine from, I believe, Dawson, to score the victory for Dash and Dawson, retaining the titles, and still the NXT Tag Team Champions, holding off in the title change until TakeOver Dallas, where American Alpha beat them for the belts, as they should have. So again, NXT thinking long-term paid off in the long run. Great match, surprising finish. The crowd wasn't happy about it, but it gave Dash and Dawson great heat, and it was a really, really fun match and a fun finish too. So loved it. I really thought this was great, and afterwards, everyone already knew that Enzo and Cass were destined to be big on the main roster, and WWE somehow managed to fuck them up as a tag team. But after this performance, even more so than Enzo and Cass, I said to myself, wow, Dash and Dawson are really starting to grow on me as a tag team. And I was telling RJ, my buddy John, @_John Knapp on the Twitter machine, I was telling everyone who had a set of ears that these guys are going to be good. And everyone already knew that by that point after this performance. But this was really the turning point for them in my book as more than transitional champions. They were one of the best tag teams in the world today. In the busyness, as Kazarian would say from Ring of Honor. Anyway, so really, really good match. After that, a Baron Corbin and Apollo Crews in a standard singles match. A good match, a solid, good, enjoyable match. Nothing too exciting about it. I didn't, but I remember as we were driving around before the show, RJ was telling me that Baron and Apollo Crews had matches on live events, and that they weren't really all that good. They weren't getting rave reviews. So I didn't have my hopes high for this match. I thought it might be disappointing, but it ultimately exceeded expectations. Again, it wasn't a great match, but Baron Corbin was gradually coming into his own around this point. His match with Samoa Joe in Brooklyn was very good. I thought the match he had to take over Respect with them against American Alpha was really, really fucking good. And he also had another impressive outing on this show against Apollo Crews, who suffered his first singles defeat on the show. Apollo Crews after this really didn't have much direction. Was kind of disappointing, but it was a good match. Baron Corbin picked up the win, which I wasn't expecting. But Baron Corbin, they were seemingly setting him up for a future NXT tag team shot, or NXT championship shot, not tag team shot, on his own, which he wouldn't get, but he would be launched into the #1 contendership at the onset of 2016, setting up his next program with Austin Aries. So I'll talk about that later on. But this was a good match, and Baron Corbin going over clean was a bit surprising. Now, probably even more memorable than the match itself, which was super fucking funny. So during the course of the match, which I don't think I noticed when it first happened, but I think RJ might have pointed it out to me while we were watching the show, was that during the course of the match, Baron Corbin roughing up Apollo Crews around ringside, and he yells to Apollo Crews, "Go back to Ring of Honor!" Which is comical because Apollo Crews was never in Ring of Honor. Considering all the people on these shows that have been in Ring of Honor, from Sami Zayn to Samoa Joe to all these other guys, maybe Finn Balor at some point, but Apollo Crews was never in Ring of Honor once. So I thought that was really funny, and his hatred against indie guys and character, obviously, in storyline, was so fucking great. So I thought that was great, even more memorable than the match itself, but I had to point that out. I would be remiss if I didn't point that out to you guys here in the review. After that, for the NXT Women's Championship, Bayley defending against Nia Jax. Again, a match I didn't have high hopes for just because Nia Jax had just debuted like 2 months earlier. She had been built up very quickly. Bayley had a few title defenses in the meantime between their title defense against Sasha Banks at Respect. In this one, she beat Alexa Bliss. She beat Eva Marie. And she faced Nia Jax on this show. And it was it was a good match. I don't see what people really like about this match, to be honest with you. It was a good match, but I saw people raving about it. I just thought it was pretty boring, to be honest with you. Bayley, for the majority of the match, had been beaten down. She kicked out of like 4 leg drops from Nia Jax, which had been built up as this unstoppable dominant move from Nia Jax, and then Bayley kicks out of it like 4 times. So that was kind of weird. I know they were going for like the near falls and shit, but I just thought that was kind of weird. So then in the end, Bayley locks in she couldn't hit the belly to Bayley, obviously, so she locks in the, not a Cohina clutch, but like a headlock or whatever, a sleeper on Nia Jax. And finally she goes out and she beats her. So Bayley retains the title. It was way too soon to put the belt on Nia Jax, and that was kind of the fear. But the match, it just wasn't all that exciting. I wasn't digging it, especially coming off of Bayley and Banks. Nia Jax was no Sasha Banks. Let's say that much. But it was an alright match. You know, it was decent. Not nearly as good as the NXT women's matches of the past, but for what it was, considering who was involved with Nia Jax and how new she was to wrestling, you know, it served its purpose. And then in the main event for the NXT Championship, for the first time ever one-on-one in WWE, or NXT, whatever, Finn Balor versus Samoa Joe. Great match. Samoa Joe had this hot streak going as a heel when he first turned in late 2015. So the feud is really good. Balor had been built up as this beloved babyface champion. They worked a really hard-hitting match. I liked the match in Dallas more. Of the 3 matches, I would probably rank it. I mean, all their matches were really good. I'd probably say Dallas was the best, then this, and then the end match inside the steel cage, which I'll talk about in a few weeks. But I thought it was a really good match, though. The crowd is very much behind Balor. I forgot to mention this with all the crazy crowd chants. They were chanting, "Hey," or was it the "Hey, we want some Bayley" in London? No, it was the "Ooh, we want to know if you will be my girl," or whatever, from the England crowd to Bayley during that match. And the "Oh, Enzo Amore." I don't know if that chant made its debut on this show, but I remember that being the chant for Enzo in the tag title match. They were chanting for Asuka's gonna kill you. I don't know if there were any chants for Baron and Apollo Crews, but those were the most notable ones. But yeah, anyway, really, really good match here. Very well wrestled. I would have put the belt on Joe, but again, NXT thinking long term, keeping the belt on Balor until that live event that I was at in Lowell, Mass. Very happy to have seen that title change live. That was awesome. So yeah, really, really good main event. Balor going over to retain the championship. I was kind of disappointing. I was expecting more. I thought maybe James Storm would show up, or Balor's next challenger would be revealed, or something along those lines. We didn't get that. As I thought Sami Zayn was showing up on the show. He did wrestle on this night, but they were holding off on his return until the following week on NXT. So anyway, I thought this was a great show. A really, really good takeover with an awesome crowd. I have fond memories, obviously, of watching it back. Watching it for the first time, and every time I've watched it back has always been a treat. And yeah, I really, really enjoy this takeover. So be sure to check out NXT TakeOver London on the WWE Network. One match to watch. Again, I love that tag title match. I would have to say the main event, though. It's not one of the best takeovers they've ever done, because overall it wasn't like a super strong card. But all things considered, it was a very enjoyable and entertaining afternoon for me personally, and I'm sure Mr. Marceau as well, watching this in between finals. It was the perfect breather after the wild week that we had after going to TLC in Boston, to watching Raw together, and now TakeOver and all that other stuff. It was a great week, and this was one of the best ways to top it off with an awesome NXT TakeOver, delivering once again. So thank you guys for checking out my review. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts on the show and my review. Be sure to share the video and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Next week, the pay-per-views keep on a-coming. Next Sunday is WWE TLC presented by the Raw brand. So next week, and I'm looking forward to this, I'm talking TLC 2016. Now, the timeline of my reviews is all fucked up because No Mercy, it was held in October of last year, and it was held in September of this year. Clash of Champions, which was in September of last year, is going to be held in December. And now TLC, which is usually in December, is going to be in October. So the timeline is all sorts of fucked up. But I am looking forward to watching the show, because that's another show I watched with Mr. Marceau, and we had a lot of fun watching it. It was a great show. And so I'm looking forward to watching that back and reviewing it for you guys. And here's the thing too, I rarely ever watch WWE pay-per-views back unless it's really, really good. Now, I watch NXT TakeOvers back all the time now after they happen. I've been doing that for about 2 years now. I don't really do that for the WWE pay-per-views, even if I'm there. Like, I didn't watch Extreme Rules back, Hell in a Cell back, TLC back. I watched none of the shows back in their entirety until I had to review them for WrestleRant. Even SummerSlams, and those especially, because those were fucking long. The only two exceptions were WrestleMania, which I had such a blast at that I had to watch it back the following week, and then this show, TLC 2016, which I wasn't even at, but I had to watch it back because it was such a great fucking show. It was probably my favorite pay-per-view of 2016 for WWE, not including NXT. So anyway, we're talking about that next week. In the meantime and in between time, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.